Viewer discretion is advised.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the New to Wrestling podcast After Dark. We are continuing tonight on our journey through the rise and fall of ECW, the documentary that is on Peacock, the documentary we're living every day, especially if Paul Heyman is in your heart like he is in mine, because
Right.
I be thinking about Paul.
Amen.
So, and honestly, everyone in ECW really, like I really do be thinking about Tommy Dreamer a lot, Taz. I mean, they're all on my mind. So
I get it.
today
I
we're
get it.
gonna
I get it.
be we're gonna be getting more into the fall of ECW very tragically, into what Paul believes was the reason ECW ended up going under, what the wrestlers actually believe was the real reason that ECW went under. And the only conclusion I have is multiple causality for all things, as we
Right.
learned in history class. So let's dive in. So where we stopped last week was we kind of mentioned this last week, how the documentary is put together a little bit scrapbooky, like a little bit decoupage. So the flow of it isn't exactly, chronological.
Linear. Yeah.
Yeah. So last week we talked about kind of the Dudley Boys, where they were at. And this week it suddenly just gets right into how, like, Paul foresaw like the end of like ECW, or how like the bubble had to burst. And basically what
Right.
he says is the wrestling business at that stage, meaning I guess like the late 90s, early 2000s,
Mhm.
became almost like the dot-com industry, in that it was an inflated bubble and it just had to burst. The pay scale just went off the chart, became very difficult to afford talent. And the guys were turning down hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to other companies just to stay with ECW, and he was having trouble paying them. And he said, and there comes a time where that's just not fiscally responsible to a person who has a family. So we had to step it up. We had to try and get licenses. We had to try and get advertisers, sponsors. And the way to do that is being a national television presence. So after the pay-per-view success, this was their next step in getting it on the television level, which we saw kind of with like WCW, with WWE. It's just like that's kind of seems like the natural trajectory of like the way things go.
Right.
But it's sad because Spike Dudley at this point says, like, we were literally starving. Like, we were
Yeah.
eating like tuna and rice for the whole week. Like, girl, I've been there.
Amen.
Veterans were leaving, people that you look up to, and you're wondering, like, are they right? Like, am I crazy? Like, am I trying to stay on a sinking ship? Checks are bouncing, and like, why do I feel like I should have to be loyal to this guy? Which
Right.
is
Fair.
very fair, very valid. And I do think it's kind of funny coming from Spike, because he does end up saying till the bitter end, like
Right.
the very end. And he's always the one that's like, am I right? Am I doing the right thing? This seems wrong.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I stayed, and I just love Spike. He's so funny. But Al Snow says he personally never had a check bounce. Like
Mhm.
Paul never owed him any money. He never had any problems getting money, but he knew a lot of guys that did, and a lot of guys that were very loyal to ECW and instrumental to their success, that were having their checks bounce. And that's literally crazy. Just so crazy. They're performing with basically no money, if any,
Right.
just to get the company through, because they just loved it so much, which is wild.
No, that's insane. And like, you really gotta like think about any of us doing our job months on end. No money.
No money.
No
Tommy
money.
Dreamer, I think, said he didn't get paid for 6 months at one point.
Right. Which is in my book. I'm sorry, are you a doormat? Like 6 months is crazy.
That's
6 months
really
is
crazy.
insanity. There's like, loving what you do, and then there's being taken advantage of. And six
Full-fledged
months is a
psychosis.
long time to not get paid to do something.
That's
Uh
crazy.
yeah, that's
I,
like absolutely bonkers. And I can understand like why wrestlers who had like gone to other companies and like ended up in ECW like didn't want to do that. Like the part of their career that they were like paying their dues, like they felt like they had already done. Like they're
fully,
so
yeah.
like why would like what is the motivation to like go back there and stay there when you know that there is more?
Right.
So it's like, you know, Yeah,
a
it's
hundred
I can't
percent.
blame these people for not wanting to like stick around, you know?
No, you can't. And it sucks. It's really hard when it's something that you love so much and you feel like you've had a hand specifically in its
Right.
success. I think that Devon Dudley says that some point later, he felt personally like invested in the success of the company, that he'd really like contributed to that. And so it's hard to walk away from something you feel like you really had your hands in. But at
Hmm.
some point it's like, okay, like I can't live like this forever. And it's also sad because it's like, all right, I've put in all this work for the company and like you can't even like cut me a check. And I'm
Right.
so like that's crazy. So it's like it's tragic. Yeah, Spike at one point said he only made $75 a night, which they're literally putting their bodies on the line, like they're endangering their physical well-being. They're traveling all the time and they can't even pay for where they're going. Like it's really wild.
Right.
Lance Storm tells this story about the three strike rule because as we know, a lot of ECW contracts were just word of like just
Just
your
a
word.
handshake
Handshake and a
and a
prayer.
word. Yeah.
Yeah. And Landstorm's like, okay, fine, we're doing a verbal contract, whatever, but I'm gonna give you the three strike rule, like with my paychecks. If three strikes, if three of my checks bounce, I bounce. Like I'm out. Like I'm
Right.
I'm not staying. Like that's crazy. So he said on the third or and then there was another thing like Paul had like a month to correct the situation if the check bounced or something. But
Right.
he was like, but if this happens three times, like I'm out. So it happened on the third time, and Landstorm went to Paul and was like, all right, look, so if this check is not resolved in the allotted time that our verbal contract gives us, then I am leaving. Like this is crazy. And he said after that, his checks were just FedEx right to his door, never had an issue. He always got his money.
Right.
But he was saying, like you said, wrestlers feel like they have to pay their dues, and so they might be too nervous to say anything. They don't want to they don't want to lose their jobs, even though they're not even getting paid to do those jobs, which is wild. But he's like, I feel like people were afraid to stand up to themselves, but like you had to.
You have to. Yeah.
You have to. I mean, you can't be funny with my money, girl. Like that's crazy.
Right. And it was like alluded to that like some of the wrestlers like on the ECW wrestler roster, wow, either felt like they couldn't go anywhere or like
Mhm.
either felt like they couldn't go anywhere or just literally weren't wanted anywhere. So when you're
Right.
talking about like um as far as like major companies like ECW was the third, like
Yeah.
this is it on a pedestal, like it by comparison of we're talking like just doing just indie shows, which is
Right.
even it is much of the same, but it is even less of a payout.
Yeah.
You're wrestling in front of like crowds of 15 in like an armory or like like a school gym. Like
Mhm.
it's not it's not glamorous by any means. So
Right.
when like you get to this point and you're like, oh wait, like I'm appearing on pay-per-views, like I am on television and blah blah, blah, and you're
Mhm.
still not like making it, like that's rough.
That's
That's rough.
rough.
Right.
Like, understatement. It's crazy. And so that's why, like, I understand. Because listen, I'm like a loyalty person. I'm like, I will stay loyal to like the organization, like whatever. I'd probably at the end of the day end up sabotaging my life to like stay at ECW or something. But
Oh, that's
also,
crazy. I
yeah,
am not
well,
that
I know
person.
you are not that person. You'll be like, no, I'm out. Like, but if I feel like if we were together, hopefully you'd take me with you and I would listen to your reason because, you do have a lot more of that than me.
I am the I don't know, the master of the cut and run
But in like
in
a
all
real
scenarios.
but not in a shitty way. Like you're not just like, oh, like you know what you're worth and you don't let
I
people beat down on you
Yeah,
like in
I
terms of
draw a
job.
line. Yeah.
You have a very firm boundary and I respect it a lot. Like it really is very inspirational to me.
Thank you.
Um so I understand like when wrestlers as much as they love ECW get the call from WWE or WCW and is like we're actually willing to pay you and you technically get like a more legit spot like and more fame and airtime and whatever. I completely understand why so many people left.
Right.
As sad as it is. Devon says the problem was Paul. Like he was never a businessman. He was a wrestling genius. He could come up with a storyline just like that, but he was just not a businessman, like in terms of the dollars and
Hmm.
cents and, dotting the
That
I's, crossing the T's. I mean,
Yeah, and I also think there is there is a Paul's also got his lines and the way he does things kind of like set.
Right.
He's not one to really bend, or
Mm,
he's not the best cooperator. Is kind of what it is alluded to a lot.
yeah,
Is that Paul had a vision, for the way that ECW was going to be, and he was going to execute that vision
by any
one
means
way or
necessary.
another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was gonna be by Paul's way. I didn't wanna bring this up because I didn't wanna ruin it, but I do know Paul is a Virgo. So that's that my way or the highway kind of vibe. My sister is
Hmm.
Virgo. A lot of people in my life are Virgos, and it's like you cannot negotiate with terrorists, Miss Girl. Like
Right.
they are like but the most I always say about my sister, I'm like, she's a bully, but she's my bully. Like she'll
Right.
do anything, like shove anyone out of the way for me. But also if I'm in the way, she's shoving me out of the way. Like
Right.
I like
Hmm.
she's
Hmm.
getting her goal, whatever.
Right.
But either way, Paul has that vibe. But Tommy Dreamer says, our greatest asset was also our greatest detriment, and that was Paul. Like he just like mishandled the money. I mean, Paul just seems like this massive creative genius to me. And so also like when you have those massive creative
You need a
geniuses,
funnel.
you
You need
need a thank you. That's
you need a funnel.
exactly absolutely. You need somewhere for it to go and someone to do it, like help you with the BS so that you can be
The
like
idea
as
guy.
a
You
100%.
need
Like,
somebody to deal with the day-to-day minutia of like running a business, and
yes.
because those are all also very time consuming, like mentally taxing, whatever tasks that need to
Mhm.
get done every single day. So
100%.
it's a, it's talked to, he just like couldn't delegate, like he couldn't let it go.
No.
He tried to do everything, and I listen, Paul, I'm right there with you. I get
Yep.
it.
I was just gonna
I
say.
get it. I understand. But it is just one of those things where it is too big of a task. It is just not feasible for one person to fill all of these roles and do them all well. Eventually you're going to do something, or something is going to slip
Uh,
through the cracks, and
absolutely.
you're gonna miss it because you're too busy putting out fire somewhere else.
Right.
So this is kind of just like the ongoing theme, is that it's like he just like held on a little too tight to his creation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I get it. I fully get it, especially when you've taken it as far as you can. And I think Vince McMahon actually says that at some point, like he's like, I get it. You know, when you take something that you have and you take it as far as you possibly can, you just feel like the same formula is working. Like you just keep trying it and seeing, and you don't know the formula's not gonna work until it like doesn't work. Like so you just
Hmm.
keep doing it. But yeah, delegating is the key because like Paul should not be like writing, editing, producing, and then also doing like payroll and budgeting and like it just is
Right.
crazy to
These are
even think about.
different functions that are a whole different person. Like should
That's
be fulfilled
yes,
by a different person.
100%.
And I mean I understand, like from a like when you're already struggling financially, the idea of bringing on more people to pay is daunting.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it is also their responsibility, like people who would be on top of handling money, is to find ways to save you money in the process. Like that,
Right. And they want to succeed too. They want the company to make money so that they can also get paid.
right, exactly. And it allows you to be like the creative like figure that you like, which is the part of the business that you love,
Right.
like um which in theory would yield, a better TV product, a better pay-per-view product, more eyes on the product. Like if you had the capacity to even be able to focus on that, you might have had an easier time navigating a network.
Right.
Than like also just living in this like combative state because you're so stressed out all of the time. Like, and again,
Yeah.
Paul, pot, kettle, high. But
We're right there.
where you're seeing, we're just these are the facts presented to us. So,
Oh yeah, no, no judgment. I mean, I completely understand. I'm not like I have all the answers. I don't. Like this
right.
is just literally again, it's hindsight is 2020. You can look back on it and be like, "Oh, well, XYZ."
Right.
But Yeah, Bubba says it was very frustrating working with a guy who lived so close to the edge that you constantly had to pull him back so he wouldn't commit business suicide.
Right.
But uh, although Paul Heyman is that guy who's always like he can't delegate, he has a vision, whatever, he also is that guy who has a vision and pushes it forward no matter what. And he does get them on TNN. He gets them on national TV. They have I believe it's a Friday night spot, which is pretty crazy. It's like before they have this like roller derby show or something,
Right.
but they get a national spot on television. That's crazy. Vince McMahon says I thought it was amazing. I thought that they could actually become major players in the wrestling world, and I was in favor of that. And he actually said he called him and was like, "Hey, like this is awesome, but like you know that you're going to have to change, right? Like you can't just go on national TV with what you're doing. Like when you have such a narrow audience in terms of like the violence and stuff, like that's only a small section of people. You have to cater to a national audience. So you're going
Right.
to have to change." And of course, like that wasn't happening. Like
No,
there was no
Paul
way.
wanted no part of that.
Yeah, there was no way. And Dawn Marie, she's so sweet. She was like, I just like, I couldn't believe it. Like this little company with just all of our heart, like we made it against
Mhm.
all the odds. We didn't have those lights and we didn't have the whatever. Like we just made it on our like spirit. Like I just love her so
Right.
much. I'm not making fun of her. I literally like genuinely thought she was like a little like she seemed like a little deer that like came to life and was just like all about ECW. Somehow
I get
a
it. Yeah,
little
yeah,
deer
yeah.
that came to life that was on the most violent wrestling program that ever existed. But
Right.
she was just so sweet. But it was a huge moment for them, but literally within 2 weeks, they lost Taz and they lost the Dudleys,
Mhm.
which is wild because they are like the heart and soul of ECW.
And mind you, the world heavyweight champion and the tag team champions.
Like just
Crazy.
so crazy. So Rob Van Dam is like it was just a classic case of the wrestlers' careers were outgrowing the company's trajectory. Like it just they had no choice. Like they were
Right.
just huge stars and like they had outgrown the company. And Taz, I thought this was like really um like interesting what he said. He was like, it was really hard for me to leave. Like Paul always did right by me. Like when I broke my neck, he paid me. But he was like, but am I a bad guy for like wanting to see what else is out there for me? I have a family, like I want to support them. Like, am I bad for wanting more for myself and just to see if I can be more? And no, like the answer is no. The edge I had was gone. Like I had done all I could at ECW. There was nothing new for me. I was bored. I didn't get those butterflies in my stomach when I went to wrestle. Like it became he said I became complacent. Like he
Right.
wanted and I get that. I so
Mhm.
understand that. And they said goodbye to him live on pay-per-view. So his last match was a pay-per-view and it was like a three-way match and I guess like the first person to get eliminated just like leaves and then it's the
Yeah.
last two and basically Taz gets eliminated within the first 4 minutes and it's like shocking. Like everyone was
Right.
like,
Because it
"What?
doesn't
Like
happen.
Taz?"
Has like
Yeah,
barely lost ever, let alone
ever.
in a quick fashion.
And he's the champion at the time.
Mhm.
Like so he loses and he's just out within the first 4 minutes. He goes, "Everyone was shocked. It was crazy." But then I looked up and at the back of the ramp like where you come in was all the guys from the locker room with Paul at the head. Um and they like said goodbye to me on the pay-per-view,
Mhm.
which like I didn't know they were gonna do. And that was like I knew I had Paul's blessing. I knew I was like meant to go forward, and it was just like a really incredible moment. And I love that because it's like you said all the time, like if you're with Paul, everybody eats, even if it's not the same table as me. Like I'm gonna make
Mhm.
sure that like you at least enjoy your food over at that table, you
Right.
know? I love that about him, and there's we talked about this last week where it really feels like there's no like he doesn't I don't know this. Like I know he holds ill will towards Eric Bischoff, but we all do, right? But
But we
like
all do, right?
but I feel
LOL.
like right, we're all on the same page, right? Um but, like, even when, Bubba Ray Dudley is talking about, like, he's like, "Paul Heyman, like, sunk the business." Like, they're still friends, and, like, Taz is like, "I'm literally leaving when they're about to go on national television, and I still had his blessing." Like, he still gave me a send off. Like, there was
Right.
still this energy, and, like, I know he's still friends with Rob Van Dam. Like, you just know he knew it wasn't, like, personal. Or, like, do you know what I mean? I don't know. It didn't get in the way of their relationship, which
No,
I
I mean,
like.
I think Paul understood that these were, these are very talented people, and he also cares about them as people. So if they can do something that is going to be better for them and their family, like, he knows them and their families. Like, it's not,
Right,
um he's a good boss in that way. Because there are, there are jobs all over the place where, the people want to keep their, like, star employee from, like, going off and, like, getting a promotion or working for blah blah blah, like, because they want them there to help them. And, like,
right.
it's a very selfish way of being a leader. um
Mhm.
I use air quotes because that's not what a leader is. But you, like, he may not have been a sound businessman, but he could lead a room, like, he could lead people.
Right,
And that's kind of one of those, like, scenarios where you kind of just, like, lead by example, where it's like, that is the kind of environment you want to create. You don't want to make it so hostile that, like, people feel like they can't leave. Like, that's crazy.
that's
uh
psychotic, yeah.
right. um and it's also like, Paul had a big hand in getting them to that level. There is no, like, there it is probably, maybe not in his, like, expressly, but, like, from the beginning, Paul's, like, whole shtick is bringing these people who, like, other companies, like, didn't want, and then bringing them to the forefront and, like, showing off their skills and hiding their negatives.
Mhm.
And that was his whole shtick. So how is he going to be upset when his shtick worked? You know? So,
That's so true.
yeah.
So, so true. Yeah, some part of me too wonders, like, if like, it's definitely that, but if, like, also, like, there was, like, a tiny bit of Paul that believed that ECW would be, like, so popular one day that, like, people would come back, or, like, there would be more give and take. Like, I know that wasn't his goal. He's like, "Okay, bye, Taz, like, see you in the future, like, when we're big and famous and whatever," but, like, that, like, if he was able to outshine WWE one day, or, like, able
Mhm.
to be on that level, like, if then, like, certain wrestlers would be able to, like, actually compete on that level and either, like, come back or whatever, like, part of
Mhm.
me always wonders, like, what his brain was thinking.
Yeah, we'll
And
never
not that
know.
he
God
that was,
bless.
like, the reason. Yeah,
Right.
but, just wondering. But Vince says, the Dudley Boys had to be a loss to the roster. They were like the heart and soul of ECW, like Devon at the tables. Like, it was just like a huge part of ECW. And Bubba says, Devon and I knew we had to do something with the financial problems looming, but we can say that Paul does not owe us money. He never did. They always got paid. And I guess, like, when they got the call, they went to Paul and were like, "Hey, we got the call. This is the offer. Like, what can you do?" And Paul was like, "I can't compete with them. Like, just go." And they were like,
Mhm.
"Well, no, we don't even want more money. Like, we just want to know that you appreciate us, that you, like, respect what we do for the business, what we do every night when we put our bodies on the line. Like, we just want to know, like, we just want a reason to stay."
Mhm.
And Paul, like, couldn't give them one.
Right.
And I guess, like, I get allegedly, Tommy Dreamer says that Bubba Ray and Devon only asked for a dollar raise and Paul couldn't even meet them there. Um, and, like, I don't know how true that is, because neither Bubba nor Devon said that that's what they specifically asked for. Like, they just wanted to be appreciated. But
Mhm.
Tommy Dreamer's like, they asked for literally a dollar more raise, and, like, Paul couldn't even meet them there, and, like, then they left. But um, Bubba says, like, "Didn't ask for money, just want to respect, and when I didn't even get that, that was when I learned ECW was the minor league and just the breeding ground for WWE."
Well, that conversation just sounds like like a man who gave up. Like, who has given up,
Fully.
and as you know what I
Yeah,
mean? So
it's
why,
true.
if you're gonna, like, come at your boss and be like, "Hey, like, I'm trying to like, they're trying to snatch me up," like, whether you, like, truly believe you can compete on that level or not, that it wasn't really about that. It was the, like, show me that you want us to be here.
That
And
you want you to be here, that like you want any of us to be here.
right, and like it just sounds like he just by that point has just been like, all right, well, they're gonna come in and take whatever they're gonna come in and take, and I can't really do anything about it, so like that's where
Right.
we are. And it just sounds like that is a conversation with somebody who has given up. So like,
That's such a
yeah,
good point.
that's I would also turn around and be like, okay, see ya, like
Yeah.
not
It's
for
true.
nothing, but it's like I don't I just gave you how many years of my life, and you can't even like acknowledge the fact that I just gave you that many years of my life. Like that's messed up. Like sorry,
It
Paul.
is.
Like I love Paul, but like that's it sounds like a man that gave up. So
Yeah. And I think Rhino says it at one point at the end where he's like, I think Paul was done. Like he was ready to be done. Like it was causing him so much stress. He was sleeping like 2 hours a night. And I think he just like didn't have it in it to keep going anymore.
mhm,
And Tommy Dreamer also says like basically Paul had this rule where it's like if you don't want to be here, like then go. Like if you don't want to do this every night for ECW, not for money, like if you don't want to be here for this organization, then just go.
mhm.
So I don't know if he like the mentality is just it's crazy. Like it's definitely
And I can
not
understand
the
that.
best.
That's not a uncommon thing in like locker rooms.
Yeah.
It's not a like uncommon like theme. That's just like if you don't want to be on this team, like don't be on this team. Like
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
that's that on that essentially. So like it's not uncommon to hear that. But it's a lot easier to be on the team when you're getting paid.
A
So
hundred when you're like reaping the benefits of being on the team.
right.
So yeah,
So
girl.
don't love that, but okay.
Um, so Bubba and Devon's last match, it was like this crazy thing. Devon says this was the most memorable night of his wrestling career. He says they won the tag team titles on their last night, and it was this whole
Hmm.
thing. So then the audience was second guessing, oh, are they actually not leaving? Because it was a known fact that they were supposed to be leaving and going to WWE. So they win the titles. And so everyone's like, oh, they're not going, like, whatever. They come back out later and they're like talking all this smack. They're like, ECW is where like men become heroes, but WWE is where heroes become legends.
Hmm.
And we're gonna take these titles and lay them in front of Vince McMahon at the desk of WWE. Um, and then they start like ripping on Tommy Dreamer, how they like broke his girlfriend's neck, like they just whatever. So then Tommy Dreamer comes out because he loves to throw hands and he starts fighting them. But then they get the upper hand. The Dudley boys get the upper hand. They start beating the crap out of Tommy Dreamer. And then surprise, Raven comes out because Raven had been at WCW but had walked out because he hated them. He was apparently very unhappy there. He just like did not like the gig, did not like the organization, walked out, came back to ECW. His surprise return was this night. So Raven comes out to defend Tommy Dreamer, beats the Dudley boys, and Tommy and Raven become the tag team champions that hate each other.
Right.
And the crowd went ballistic.
Well, yeah, because like
Ballistic.
they hadn't seen Raven in years, so
Yeah, like
it
the
was not on
Dudleys are
anybody's
leaving.
radar. And because of the
Yeah,
way that he left up, like he walked out of WCW, fans wouldn't have known because was
right.
technically like still under contract.
Which is
So
crazy. I
right,
love that. And so apropos, like for Raven.
no,
Um, honestly, apropos just for the times. Like everyone was it was a swinging
oh,
door.
sh- coming and
Um,
going,
yeah, so then they get into how TNN really restricted ECW. This is harkening back to Vince being like, you're gonna have to change, right? And Paul
right?
said, no, I'm not. um,
Okay,
but
girl.
like literally the very first like episode there was supposed to be like a music video. TNN said no music videos, absolutely never. You're not allowed to say the word hate. We prefer strongly dislike. The intro music is too demonic. It's going to be off-putting to people. Like every single thing like was just a problem. And Paul was like it was horrible, but he did not acquiesce to any of the suggested changes from the rip. Like from the rip, he was like, "No, I'm not doing that." Like the
Right.
from day one, he was beefing with the network. But what was great because again, Paul, the idea guy, creates a character, which I think this is so funny, called Cyrus, who is like a quote unquote representative of the network, and he becomes the lead heel. Like he would come in and be like, the network is very unhappy with the proceedings going on here.
Right.
Like this guy would come out with the headset and the whatever and just like get in the way of things
Right, which is
intentionally.
the probably the smartest way to acquiesce to the network's demands, while still making it entertaining to some degree.
Yeah.
Because now you have a on-air character that can like fulfill the role. So if like Paul started making all of these changes, everyone would know that it was Paul like making the changes. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because it,
Mhm.
you know, it's very he's the one who's out there with the mic. He fired Sabu in the ring. Like it's they would know he's the guy that has the power. I think this allows that him to kind of play the network game, while still
Mm.
saving face with the fans. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that's kind of like how that why that like worked out so well.
Yeah, it was genius. It was so genius because like if you didn't want like if TNN didn't want like flaming tables and barbed wire, like they could like go like they're gonna do it, and then like Cyrus would come out and be like, no tables, like no barbed wire, like
Right,
no whatever, and like take it. And so then it's
right,
like, man, Cyrus sucks, not like this they sold out and this
right,
sucks. Yeah.
right. Hmm.
So honestly, genius. But Paul says, I love the descriptors Paul used. I thought the sentence was like so inventive because we walked in thinking that this was going to be the answer to all our problems, i.e., TNN. Like they thought getting a network gig would be the answer. And it became the albatross that dragged us down underwater.
Well, I know. Amazing.
Really paints a picture.
Hmm.
Really paints a picture. Um,
Quite the wordsmith.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
Right,
Ron Buffon said we had cut a pretty bad deal with TNN. We had no commercial time, no money for the show, and yet they expected high production value. And Paul didn't want to change ECW. He was like, they want us to compete with WWE and WCW, but gave us no money, didn't advertise us at all, didn't like do anything, like not
right,
a single press release, like literally nothing, which is, I'm sorry, like really terrible.
right.
Like, why would you have this show on your network and like you don't want them to succeed? Like, I don't know. Like, I understand like the hardcore-ness of it is difficult to market, maybe, but it's like you knew what they were when you signed up for this. I don't know. So like why would you not want viewers to at least like sample it? Like go try it out. Like, I don't know. It just seems
Maybe
like
because
silly to
Paul
me.
was very difficult to work with. I
Mm,
think it was probably at least one of the contributing
really?
factors to why would you advertise something? Why would you pour money into something that you're not even sure is going to be a viable like business option in a year from now? You signed on into the contract because like you know they were popular, they were this, they were at that. From day one the guy in charge is not listening to anything you have to say or suggest, or so
Mm,
why would you then turn around and hand him a bunch of money?
I
I
see.
wouldn't, like, realistically. And I'm just
Yeah.
like talking from like a business, like straight, like I love the product, I love what they do, like it's not, but like from a business standpoint, why would I give somebody who has shown and proven that they are completely content with being insubordinate more money? Why would I do that as
Mm,
a like network executive who doesn't really, they're not in the network executives are not in the business of risk. That is not what they're doing.
that's
They
true.
have formulas that they follow, and that is how they make their money. The people they feed the masses their brain sugar. Like that's it. That's
Mm,
all it is. So if you are now presented with something that is very not in the mold of what you know is brain sugar, I wouldn't put my money behind it either. So like
mm.
I can't imagine that that didn't have something to do with it.
That's a really good point, and I honestly didn't think of that. Like, of being like, well, if you're not going to like acquiesce to our demands, then we're not going to
Give
promote
you,
you.
yeah.
Oh,
That's how that works. Like,
that is so crazy. Because I was just
mhm.
like, why would they do that? That's crazy. It's
They'll
terrible.
do
But
it all
like
the
that makes sense to me now that you say
I was
it.
like, if you look at like WB like today, like they start projects all the time just to sink them. If it's not going the way that they think it's going, like they'll just sink it.
Honestly, that's so
Because
true.
sometimes it's cheaper to cut the loss, cut the contract, pay them out of the contract than it is to just continue.
Try and keep it going.
Right.
Wow.
Mm.
That is interesting. And I wonder, like, because I wonder if that's kind of what, like, I know there's a lot of things that the wrestlers were alluding to, like, when there was like, well, he was just kind of like a bad businessman, made bad choices. Like,
Well,
that's definitely a bad choice.
right. You know what I mean? Well, there's multiple like scenarios where they like where multiple people kind of allude to the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it honestly, he was probably just like so stressed out to even get to this point that like just like was not trying to like change anything. He's like,
Right.
literally what we've done has gotten us to this point, so like it obviously is working. But again, it's national television. They have their own set of rules. They have their own like governing body. The FCC is a thing. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
I will say I understand Paul. I understand him a lot, like wanting to protect what ECW was, like because it had this amazing cult following, and I so get that. But that's the thing with like a cult following, it's like it'll probably never be mainstream then. Like if it has
right,
such a cult like specific
right.
following, then like which, is not news. We all know this. So but like I understand like wanting to be so protective of the image of ECW because it's like if you I think we said this during his Hall of Fame speech episode where it's like ECW was like this bright light that just was meant to burn out quickly because it was
Hmm.
just so unique and had its own thing. And you can never really say, like, even on TNN, like, you can never really say ECW like washed out or changed their image. They were just like so true to themselves to the
Hmm.
end, to
Right.
their detriment, apparently. But like, I get why he would want to be protective of it, but I also get why then a network wouldn't be like, sure, like, or like
Yeah.
would
Yeah. Exactly.
push back for sure.
Hmm. I
Wow.
agree.
That is sad, girl. But yeah, so Tommy Dreamer's like, it doesn't matter how good the product is if no one knows you're there, like you're not
Doesn't
selling
matter. Yeah.
anything. Like it doesn't matter. Um, Paul says we had all these licenses and sponsors and advertisers that were staying with us because we were on a national network. So we can't dump out of the deal with the national network, even though we hate them. So they're publicly negotiating with WWE to bring their show to the network so that they could kick us off.
Right.
But he's like, I can't leave because I'm in a contract, but they won't kick us out, even though they're negotiating with another organization. And I can't talk to another organization because I can't in my contract it says I'm not allowed to. So we're literally just like at a standstill.
No, they're just marooned. Like,
Yeah. And Paul cuts the most insane shoot like before an episode of ECW and like I if you don't watch this documentary like the whole thing at least watch this part. It's like towards the latter half of the episode. It is the most insane shoot on national television I've ever seen. Not that
yeah.
I've seen many because I'm hashtag new to wrestling, but
Still.
like it's so crazy where he literally is like, you guys always want to talk about being real and having a shoot. Well, this is a shoot. I hate this network. I hate it so much. I want you to just kick me off so bad. Like just rips them to shreds. It's like you want to go give your billions of dollars to WWE, you should save that and use it to get attorneys because like I'm not done with you or like whatever he says, but he's
Hmm.
literally says like I'm going to make your lives hell until you kick
Right.
me off this network. I'm going to break every rule you give me. I'm going to just destroy your lives and that is a shoot. And then it's
Right.
like cut.
Hmm. It's crazy. But
It
again,
is insane.
I wouldn't work with that guy.
I know, I
Like,
know. It makes me sad because at the same time, I'm just like, wow. Like I'm just enamored by him. Like I
no,
just
absolutely. I
but I
get
get
it.
it from a business stand, and this is why I mean, I don't know. I just all those little like P's and Q's and like crunching numbers and parameters and whatever, I could just never be the life for me. Like
Mm-mm.
I could never do that because like watching something like that, I'd be like, I don't know, guys, maybe he has a point, and then I would get fired. Like I don't know, like it would just be so bad. like it was just incredible and like honest and real and like he just can never say he's
Just
not real.
just Paul. Just Paul.
Just Paul things. Um, but he says after all these years of hard work, just watching someone cannibalize us and we're
Mm.
powerless to do anything. He was like, we were just caught between different organizations taking bullet after bullet, like there's just no end in sight. And then randomly from this like little moment, this insane shoot, suddenly they're like, Rob Van Dam was one of the greatest wrestlers at ECW. And again, is that not true? It's absolutely true, but it's just like, how did we jump here?
Well, I think
But
it's that he became like
the network,
the main event person after
yes,
like people were like snatched. So I think they were trying to be like, okay, and this is when Rob Van Dam like really became Rob Van Dam.
right.
Um, which I get, but again, we are literally like at like ECW is having its like death knell, like just you know what I mean? Like it is just in
Yeah.
the final throes of its life, and they're like Rob Van Dam, and you're like, okay.
What a guy. And yes, what a guy. Love that
Hmm.
guy. Absolutely. It was just like it was just kind of like weird timing. But Rob Van Dam was a star of ECW, and I think we talked about this last week where when he cut that little like promo and like they weren't even doing like the Rob Van Dam like when he points at himself yet, like he wasn't even there yet. And now like every time those hands even come up, they begin. They get ready. They're
Right.
like, "Oh yes." So Paul's like he was calm, but he was definitely braggadocious, like he knew what he was, but he wasn't like aggressive. He wasn't an agitator, but he also like he could fight.
He's hot.
Um he's
He's a stoner.
he
It's a stoner personality.
I
If
know,
you've
I
met one,
love
you've met them
it.
all. He's just a stoner.
They were like
He he's
sorry.
into what he likes. He is pretty chill. It probably takes a bit more than the average to upset him. Uh yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I love it. Again, we talked about this I think last week. Like the whole time he's being interviewed for this, he's like it's like, yeah, you know, ECW is like
Hmm.
awesome. Like, you know, I love him so much. He's so great. But they yeah, Paul's like, you know, he people wanted to hear him do his chill little promos. They wanted to hear him talk about 420. They wanted to know everything he was doing, like
Hmm.
all the stuff he was getting into. Um Unfortunately, like he was the title holder I think for 23 months. He was like almost I
He
think
was
the
a
very
TV champion for almost 2 years.
the TV champion. And like he was so good that the TV champion was like competing with like the quality or the caliber of like the
Hmm.
world heavyweight champion, which is
Yeah.
crazy. Um and he had to forfeit the title because he broke his ankle or something and he had to like
Hmm.
take time off and he basically said I think Cyrus is the one that came out to like take the belt and he said to Cyrus like just know whoever takes this title from me, I'm coming back and I'm gonna kick your ass. And actually, like I forgot for 1 second that because he also drops an F bomb, like
Hmm.
I'm gonna thing kick your ass. And I forgot for one moment that they were on network television. And I was
Right.
like, oh, you can't
Hmm.
say that because if it was just another ECW day, like sure,
You
sure,
can't
sure.
say that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that's a crazy one. Um, this was this next part was slightly confusing to me, but I think I finally figured it out. But it's Mike Awesome was at ECW, left while he was the heavyweight champion. Paul literally sent cops to go after him to get the belt back because he was going to WCW and Eric was going to have him throw the title in the trash on TV. And I guess
Yes.
the police reclaim it somehow because that doesn't happen. But then Taz, who at the time was at WWE, fights Mike Awesome, who at the time was at WCW
Hmm.
for the ECW title belt.
Right.
Crazy.
That is crazy.
A lot of
That is absolutely bonkers. So Mike Awesome goes to WCW. He's under contract with ECW, but as we know, contracts in ECW are
la la la.
handshakes. So he goes to WCW and as the ECW champion. So my like suspicion is at this time probably like they didn't have somebody like that caliber to just be like t put the title on them. Sure.
I
So
see.
And we know that the WWE and ECW had a good like working relationship. So I think they sent Taz to kind of like, because he's like very much synonymous with ECW.
Of
But
course.
still, it's still just a weird scenario that happened because I'm sure Paul said whatever he had to say to get Mike Awesome to just complete this match and finish whatever obligations he had.
I didn't even
Um,
think of that. Yeah, that's true. That's
and
crazy.
so that they could get the title off of him in a way that wouldn't be like, oh, like we just stripped him of the title. You know what I mean? Because then
Right.
he can go around every promotion forever and just be like, oh, I never lost that title. Like that title's mine. Like he could call himself the ECW champion till the day he dies.
Oh, ew.
You know
Hate
what I
that.
mean? Not that he
Yeah,
would necessarily. I'm just saying he could.
he might.
Which is not like, it's not a good look as far as like a wrestling organization goes. Like you want
That
your
makes sense.
championship to pass the way it's supposed to. Win loss,
Right.
win loss.
Right.
Um. So yeah, that's just a wild
Yeah.
scenario in ECW history.
Yeah. So like Taz takes the belt and
Mm-hmm.
then he like goes back to WWE with it temporarily. He like fights Triple H in it or with it, like
Yeah,
while he's still a title holder. Tommy Dreamer comes out at the WWE match and like tries to jump in on like Taz's
as his
defense
behalf.
and
Yeah.
gets pedigreed. What a shame. And
Oh, he took it like a champ though. He
he
really sold that
did.
one.
Girl, I love Tommy Dreamer so much.
Mhm.
I just there's something about him that I just admire so much. But so then like the next week like Tommy Dreamer beats Taz for the belt. So like Taz once again goes back to ECW so that
Mhm.
Tommy Dreamer can take the belt off of him. And this was crazy because this was the first time that Tommy Dreamer in his entire career at ECW held a title.
Right.
And he gets so emotional, like oh my God. He like thanks the fans and like literally breaks down and he says like I was so pissed. This like cracked me up. He was like, I was so pissed because I never wanted Tommy Dreamer to hold a title. Like I always wanted him to be this guy that like never
Mhm.
quite got there. Um and I only won titles like when people left, like
Right.
that had them. And
Mhm.
so he just was like mad that he had to like take the title because like somebody left and so now it had to be his responsibility even though
Right.
he's like Paul gave it to me because he knew I wasn't going anywhere and I
Mhm.
deserved it and whatever but I was like so pissed off which is so
Right.
funny to me because like
Mhm.
the juxtaposition of the emotions of like just you won the title for the first time in your this long career at ECW and you won it in like the craziest way defeating Taz even though he's not there anymore is wild but
Mhm.
like to be just so mad about it I just think is
I
so
know.
interesting but yeah I love that guy. But then we get Mr. Eric Bischoff, who I despise.
Mhm.
It's fine. Um, Eric says, because now we're going back into like why the ECW on a national television show failed. But he's like, you see a lot of or you serve a lot of masters when you work on a national television level. And Paul's audience was far too narrow. You couldn't serve the hardcore audience and compete with the mainstream. It was meant to be a small closely held regional promotion.
Yeah, I mean
So,
that one I'll give it to him, but he's not
yeah,
wrong. He's like that's what we've been saying the whole time. I was like, you have to play nice with these people. Like that is
yeah.
you have to play the game to be in the game. Like it sucks, it's unfortunate, but that's where you're at.
I agree with what he said. I just hate how he says things.
Oh well,
He just
yeah, no,
always has this like
he's the
shit-eating
worst.
grin on his face, and he's like, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, it's okay. He's already been by this point. He's like in ECW's like career, like he's already been removed from WCW, brought back, and removed again. Like it's not like he has anything to like stand on. He
Yeah.
all he has been just taken those 5 years at WCW that he like turned around and blah 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 for 30 years. He has been just naming that 5 year span of his entire life as like what you point and look at as like why you're a success. You have not done jack since you were on Raw as a general manager character who ended up just being shifted out after 3 years. You went to TNA, did the exact same thing you did in WCW, which was bring all your little friends, literally the same friends, Hulk Hogan, like, yeah, brought them
No.
all over to TNA,
Girl.
almost ruined that company. And then now you're just a bitter man, who literally now you're just a bitter man who just who watches wrestling products and just bashes all of them, because you think you are the greatest wrestling mind to ever happen. And it's just like, you had a 5 year span of success 30 years ago. Put that on a resume. Where's the gap? What happened? What have you been doing for 30 years?
Oh
I'll
my
wait.
God. Drag him.
I can't stand that man.
Drag him. Oh my God. I'm literally, oh, I'm like thrilled right now.
It's
I was just like,
crazy. I just don't like, what leg are you standing on? And he spends all of his time just like tweeting at Tony Khan. And don't get me wrong, Tony Khan in AEW like is a giant nepo baby with way too much money. Like I get it. Like I understand he's a pain in
whose
the
kid
ass.
is he?
His father, he owns like the Jaguars. He's like a billionaire.
Okay.
So yeah. So he's got like mad money. But like that's, I get Tony Khan is annoying, but you don't have a like a job. Like your whole shtick is just tweeting about how bad AEW is, and it's just like, okay. I was like, who cares? Who
No one
cares?
asked you.
No one asked.
No
No
one
one
asked
asked.
you.
So that's
This is
that's
what you
my two
literally
cents
just
on
said.
Eric Bischoff. So I might people will come for me. Some people really love.
Why?
Some people really love him. I
Okay,
swear.
fight me then.
I
And
just I
what?
just don't I just don't care for him. I just
At all.
I think he's just a smug, bitter man who like did something okay 30 years ago and thinks that's like his ticket to never be faulted or never like, I was like, maybe I don't know what pedestal you're living on in your mind, but it's made of sand. So I'm gonna need you to get it together.
Get slide on down. Literally, this was what just happened. You're like,
No. Like
drag her by the hair.
there's just something about that
Drag
man that makes me
him.
rage. Like
No, he
makes me
is. There's
rage.
something about him that literally just like
It's the
flicks that.
arrogance. It's the condescension.
And
Like,
honestly, if you guys want to come out here and like criticize like Paul Heyman for his decisions, I'm gonna come out here and criticize Eric Bischoff for his decisions. We equal playing field. I'm gonna come at you from every angle. I don't
mhm.
care.
Right.
The end.
The
Anyway.
end. Moving on.
So,
That was
um,
my diatribe on Eric Bischoff.
it was
Continue.
beautiful to behold. Props.
Thank
Loved
you.
it. 10 out of 10.
Mm.
So Paul says our plan was to go on a new network, but we couldn't negotiate with a new network because it would violate our contract with TNN. Um, Tommy says we were on TNN for a little more than a year and they didn't live up to their part of the deal. And then they acquired WWE and finally gave us the boot, and it was just a horrible time. Vince kind of says the same thing as Eric, where it's like, he just couldn't go mainstream because of the type of audience he had. Rhino says, I didn't think ECW was gonna fold. Like I truly didn't believe it because
Mm-hmm.
it was Paul's baby. Like there was just no doubts about it. Like I really thought we were gonna pull through. And it was unfortunate because choices like you said before are really minimal. So you either had to try and find a new job or stick it out and see like what
Mm-hmm.
you could do. Tommy said a lot of people were owed a lot of money, and Paul just kept saying, "You're gonna get it, you're gonna get it." And we were really so close. It was heartbreaking how close we were to like being a success. Um, and then Rob Van Dam says, I knew they were gonna go belly up when the money they owed me was an amount I knew they would never be able to pay back. Like
That's
it was just
crazy.
like insurmountable, which is, I mean, again, like I just think that's so wild. I can't imagine like even if I missed one paycheck, I would be like, okay, like what's going on here?
No,
Like I
literally.
can't imagine it getting to an amount where you're like, this is fiscally impossible for anyone to ever be able to pay me back this amount of money. So it's just not
Mm-hmm.
happening.
That's crazy.
And I know we already talked about like why people stayed, why people went, whatever, but
Right.
that's just like wild to me. Um, Nunzio said, not sure where the money went. It's like we weren't performing for empty audiences. I'm really not sure like what happened with that. And it is like it's one of those questions that happens often with businesses where it's like, okay, I know the company's making X amount of money but you're saying you can't give me money. So like where is
Mm-hmm.
that money going?
Right.
which, you know, we never know the ins and outs, like what things cost, like what is actually happening, but
Mhm.
it is like I would feel the
I
same
would love
way.
to know. I'd read that spreadsheet.
Absolutely. I would see the what is it? Like the the annual like year in review of the finances, whatever it's
The
called, but
P&L,
yes. Ah, thank you, the
profit and loss
P&L,
statement.
profit and loss statement, thank you. Um, because it's true, it's like, they're saying, like, I think Tommy says at one point, "We were the only organization to go bankrupt with full crowds, like, sold out pay-per-views, sold out shows, like, all the time," and it's just like,
Mhm.
where like, all like, the merch is being sold, like, so where is the money going? It is just
Mhm.
such an it's that age-old question, like, I would just love to know. I would love to see the paperwork. I'm sure it's on
Right.
Post-its and on the back of, you know, oil change car receipts and all kinds of
Right.
different things,
It's
but
probably just, like, in the archives of, like, some, auditors, just, like, existence, you know?
I would love to
Just
see that.
wild. Absolutely wild.
Yeah. So then oops. So right after ECW closed, WCW closed, and so then there were fewer options for wrestlers. So
There was
people were
one.
really screwed. It was just WWE. And like
Mhm.
it's hard enough to get into the WWE on any day, no matter what's happening. Like so
Right.
now it's the only option for people. Like that's
And you now
crazy.
have literally 2 times the amount of wrestlers,
Ooh.
owned by the same company. So it's not like WWE just, inherited all of these other companies like TV time and whatnot.
Yeah.
They still only had the amount of hours that WWE had. So finding a way to incorporate 2 whole rosters of other wrestlers is crazy.
I think Nunzio said it was like 90 wrestlers at least.
Right.
90 wrestlers. How many do you see in one match? Maybe like 8?
Max.
Like, maybe. And that's if
Mhm.
there's like a tag team. I don't even know. Like,
Right. And wrestling needs stories, so you need to see the same people.
over and over again.
Right.
That's I can't imagine that. And Rhino says, he goes, I was in complete denial because I was living my dream. Like, I was
Mhm.
on a wrestling production that was meaningful and like I was doing work and had stories that were meaningful to me. Like, I was
Right.
literally living my dream and there was no way it could come to an end. Um, Dawn Marie says, I thought my life stopped and I didn't receive a job at WWE until 2 years after ECW closed. So I was living in this reality where I thought I might never walk into the ring again. That's
Mhm.
really scary too. Like 2 years in just limbo, like wondering if you're
Right.
ever going to get a wrestling job again.
Mhm.
Especially like these were people who are in main storylines and huge parts of ECW. Then
Right.
suddenly they're like, you might not even be good enough to be like a whatever person at WWE, like, you just
Right.
don't know.
Yeah, and it's just like it took so long just to get through all of the people. Like, and you had and when WWE bought WCW, it had a lot of those like big name wrestlers like under contract, but because they were like guaranteed contracts, they basically
Mm.
just were allowed to ride out the rest of their contract,
Oh my god.
without having to, like, wrestle or anything. So there were, like, WWE does this weird invasion angle where they team up WCW and ECW, but because they were missing, like, your big name stars, like, from WCW, it just felt very like a
Oh no.
lackluster invasion, you know what I mean?
Oh no.
And you again, you can't fault the wrestlers who had, 2 years on their contract paid and not have to work
Yeah,
for taking it, you
without a
know?
doubt. Without
So,
a doubt. It's so
um,
true.
it's crazy. But yeah, they just had so many people.
Yeah.
And WWE remained the only company from 2001 to like the only major company.
Mhm, mhm,
TNA has existed in this time, but they just were never on that kind of level.
mhm.
But they don't get a competitor until 2019.
Which is
A-
AEW?
AEW. And that's
Mm.
the only time like a company has because even when AEW was coming to the forefront. TNA was still kind of like on the back foot, or they were Impact at the time, but they were still like recovering from what like Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff and all of them basically did to the company. Um,
Unreal.
yeah, they're having a big turnaround nowadays. So,
I actually
which is
think
great.
I'm pretty sure Tommy Dreamer is at TNA right now as like an advisor or something.
Hmm.
I was like
I
crawling
think
down the
so.
rabbit hole of
Yeah,
his
yeah.
life. Because I also wanted to know what zodiac sign he was. But yeah, I think he's at TNA. But Bubba says that there were two reasons that ECW went under. One was he said the violence really didn't do them any favors, like it really lost a lot of that mainstream audience. And two, he said mismanagement. Paul was a really bad businessman. And it was just blatant mismanagement of the funds, the business, the trajectory, the rate of growth, just all of that.
Right.
And it always is interesting to me because Bubba is such like a violent, like brutish whatever dude, and but he also has this like business acumen that is like so wild. And like we
Hmm.
knew this because of he said like I actually had a background in business and like helped ECW with a lot of the
The
day-to-day
back end
running.
stuff. Yeah.
But I just like it always cracks me up because like he really is like every woman, it's all in him. Like he can do
Hmm.
anything. Like it's
No,
just
actually.
so cool. But Paul, however, says it ended because we couldn't get on another network in time, and it's that simple. Anyone who thinks anything different is dead wrong or just doesn't know. But it's also like if you manage the business correctly, it wouldn't have to be such a mad scramble to get on a network in time.
Right.
Like it wouldn't have to be like life or death to get on a new
Hmm.
network. Do you know what I mean?
And we're also like, again, like this was made in 2004. So
Right.
he's had a lot of time since then to, reflect
Mull things
on his
over.
time. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we are getting this, not like fresh out of, but,
Only 4 years after, which is not a lot of time to be
right.
honest.
Hmm. So,
So, Paul ends up going to WWE, which I don't think I've said this on the show. I think I only said this to you when I saw you. I was like, it kind of gives me a thrill that like eventually at some point in the main podcast we're going to see Paul basically every week.
hmm,
Like what a thrill.
what a
Like
thrill.
just not, I know it's not going to happen for a while, like a
Yeah,
long while, and hopefully we make it. We will.
we will.
But I just was like, one of those days, Paul is gonna walk down the ramp and they're gonna introduce him and he's gonna get on that booth with JR and it's just gonna be such a thrill.
Oh,
But
amen.
he said, like, I had no choice. Like I had to go. And anyone that doesn't take the next step is in denial. I learned to accept reality and move on, which is like, I
There you
mean,
go.
I could really learn something from that because my God, I love to
Hmm.
grip. Love to hold things for so long.
LOL.
This cracked me up too. His very first night at WWE, he's just on the mic with JR, and JR kind of said, he goes, I remember two things about that night. He remembers one, JR just saying to him, like, hey, we're gonna have a good show, like, don't worry about it, like
Hmm.
we're gonna and they actually play the clip. Like, I guess they have the audio of like what JR actually said, and
Yeah.
it was like,
Stick with me, kid. Like,
stick with me, kid. He was like, come on, Paul, like riding a bike, like stick with me,
hmm.
kid, like we're gonna have a good show or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Um And then he goes, and the other thing I remember is he says this about some woman in the ring whose name is escaping me. But she's basically forced to strip in the ring.
It was probably like a
And
bra panties match.
yeah, maybe. Like I don't know, some she's just like standing there and whatever. But basically Paul says on the mic on live television, "Hey mom, I came to Washington DC and now I'm going to get to see Bush."
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's Paul for you. Love it. Love it.
That is so great.
I love that.
Like,
I
that's
love that.
honest. The thing is it outwardly disgusting? Sort of. But,
Yeah.
like, it's also
Clever.
because, yes, it's so clever. I almost don't hate it. Like, I thought it was funny.
Right. No, I get it. No, same. No, I
I
agree.
came to Washington, D.C., and now I'm going to see Bush. That is
I love that.
honestly, it's hysterical. It's so funny. And he goes 30 voices immediately panicking in the headset, freaking
Oh,
out. He
he
goes,
loves
and
that.
I learned what glass ceilings should not break because of
Mhm.
me on my very first night, and I learned very quickly.
Right.
It is pretty funny, but Bubba calls Paul an evil genius in a complimentary way. And he's like,
Right.
Paul is an evil genius. He is Dr. Frankenstein. And Dr. Frankenstein is not going to take orders from anyone. Like, this was not Paul's dream. He just, he's this incredible mastermind. Vince says that Paul should be proud of his accomplishments, for his own wrestling promotion to end in bankruptcy and for him to still want to continue in the business that he loves, speaks highly of the individual, but he never got his dream, which was he says, like, I'm sure that his dream was to hopefully one day surpass WWE,
Right.
which of course, and he never saw that fulfilled, and then he had to go work for WWE, which is crazy. But again, it Vince, hate to give it to him, but again, this was 30 years ago. Vince, you know, like, really is like, but he should be incredibly proud of, like, the things he's accomplished, even though he never got his dream. Like, the fact that he loves his business so much and continues to show up and, like, do whatever he has to
Mhm.
do, like, to be involved in it, like, really speaks to the person that he is.
Right. And like and looking at his or like and listening to his like Hall of Fame like speech, it's like that's not that's that's not a man who didn't accomplish his dreams, you know?
So true. His Hall
So
of Fame speech, I mean.
that's what I'm saying. And like it was so powerful on so many levels, but like a big part of it was like what has been like a credit to Paul's success is that like he's not afraid to fail. Like he is okay with failing because he's just going to come back better. Like and he says that like over and over in his speech. He's like I'm just
Mhm.
going to come back better. It doesn't matter.
Mhm.
So like to really be like given like your first big life L and to like just come back better, it's impressive.
Like, really, it truly, truly is. I mean, and ECW still lives on after all these years, like, lives on forever. Stevie
Psh,
Richards says that. He's like, ECW will always live on. It just will never ever die. Like, it's
no,
just too powerful for that.
no,
Um, Tommy Dreamer is like, ECW was the mark of excellence. Like, if you made it at ECW, you could make it anywhere. People still remember how ECW was and how excellent it was. Bubba says, like, I still go out to this day and get ECW chants. It doesn't matter.
he still
It
does. He
pr
got it at WrestleMania. He was a
Amazing.
guest referee for a like a street fight match, and he was getting ECW chants. I mean,
I
granted, they
freaking
were in
love
Philly, so like
Philly.
a little biased, but still.
I love that. And he says it propelled people higher in their careers. Like, it trained them to be these massive stars. Mick Foley says chanting ECW is like paying tribute to the guys who did things a little bit differently, and it's like a comfort to people.
Hmm.
Um but I will the last quote of the entire documentary is like a tidbit from Paul, and I did write the whole thing down because I thought it was very apropos, and I would like to read the whole thing. It's not super long, but I mean, I feel like it's the best way to end this episode. But Paul says, you cannot achieve success without the risk of failure. And I learned a long time ago, you cannot achieve success if you fear failure. If you're not afraid to fail, then you have a chance to succeed. But if you're never going to get there, but you're never going to get there unless you risk it all the way. I'll risk failure. Sometimes half the fun is failing, learning from your mistakes, waking up the next morning and saying, okay, watch out. There I come again. A little bit smarter, licking my wounds, and really not looking forward to getting my ass kicked the way I just did yesterday. But now I'm just a little more dangerous.
Hmm. I love it. I love that. What a guy.
And it ends with him just like leaning on the ropes at WWE, and like the whole crowd is chanting ECW. And like that's
Hmm.
how the documentary ends.
Oh, I love it.
Wow.
Amazing. What a guy.
I'm sad
Like
it's over.
truly, truly a spectacular guy.
I love that guy. And I listen, of all the like, again, we can sit here and like ramble and be like, he could have done this, he could have done that, whatever. We all know this. He knows this probably better than we do, of
Right.
course. Um, yeah, I think that it's crazy and unfortunate that he had to learn such a humongous L in front of many, many people, and
Right.
honestly, at the expense of a lot of people.
Mhm.
It's a hard lesson to learn, especially when you had literally people's lifelines at your fingertips and like their means of making money and their livelihood and everything. So that's crazy and hard and difficult. But I also think he paid his dues and
Right.
he's come back and he's persisted. And my God, he is unkillable. Thank God.
Amen. Long live ECW.
Swear, yo, long live ECW for real, girl. I I can't wait until we talk about the Barely Legal match. I can't wait till we watch more ECW one of these days. And yeah, I mean, it's really cool. And I'm so envious in the best way of the people who lived it, who like
Mm.
really lived like the feeling. Cause like we talk about this all the time. Like if I was there for ECW or Shotgun Saturday Night at WWE, girl,
It would have been we would have been
first of all,
thriving.
we would have been thriving. Also, probably would have died so young. Let's be real. But I like
Yeah.
it's just so crazy. But been it would have been in a lot more precarious situations than we have been, and that's saying something. But
Oh well.
uh, but
Oops.
yeah. So long live ECW. Paul Heyman is God, and we hope you enjoyed the third installment of the Rise and Fall of ECW. Let us know what you think, and
Okay.
yeah, hopefully we'll see you
Soon. We'll see you
soon,
soon.
right?
Yeah,
We'll see you
we got
soon.
stuff
We have so
coming for
many
you
things. We
guys.
have so many things working right now. Like I'm like I don't even remember what's coming up next, but hopefully you'll be
No,
here more.
honestly, I mean it is also ever changing because my mind is like a just I my mind is the stairs in Hogwarts. That is
Oh yeah,
like
we're going upwards. We just don't know it northwest, east, or south. I'm not
no, no,
100%
no.
sure. But yeah, we have so many good things coming up for you guys, and I'm so excited that you get to be here for this ride. We're very, very grateful. And we'll see you on the next one.
All right. Bye.